How's things? How you been keeping?
I'm well, thank you. I'm at home here in LA, and the sun is shining. Thankfully, the pandemic seems to be on the right side of good stuff for us here. It's really opening up. So no complaints at all.
That's good. That's good. Speaking of that, I literally had my second jab like 2 hours ago. So
Right, right. Yeah,
the
yeah.
first time,
You're gonna need to lie down later.
yes, probably the first one didn't agree with me too much, but
Right, right, right.
I'm told the second one isn't too bad. So fingers crossed. So if I
Okay.
if I like fall out of shot, that's probably why.
I'm glad of the warning, or I'll just think I'm boring you to death, and you teed up your excuse early.
Well, first off, congratulations on the film.
Thank you very much.
Really, really enjoyed it. I watched it over the weekend. It's really, really good. So congratulations. This was I think this was. Did you tell me if I'm wrong? But obviously this was at Toronto last year. Was it Toronto last year? You
It
debuted it.
was, it was, yeah. That was its debut, its premiere, and it was so bittersweet, because Toronto is my favorite film festival on the planet. I've had a few films there. It's always been an extraordinary experience getting to see it with those films with the Toronto audience. So to have my own film there, but not be able to go and experience it with an audience, was really sort of bittersweet in a sense. But the sweet kind of was even sweeter because they only accepted 50 films last year, and normally they accept 300. So that was a double honor. And also because it was virtual, so many more people in so many more countries got to see the film. So, I'm embracing the silver lining.
Yeah, absolutely. That was going to be my question. Because I remember seeing interviews with you and excuse me, your cast and your guys behind the scenes, and you were all on having to do it by via Zoom. So my question was going to be whether that was bittersweet, but you've answered that because I can imagine it's your debut. It's a shame, but hey, I'm sure you'll do it again. So that's all good. Um,
Yeah, that's the hope
that's
anyway.
the hope. So take me back to when this came about for you, because obviously, I mean, was this offered to you as an actor first, or was it offered to you as a director first, or had you been kind of looking for something to kind of kickstart you as a director?
Yeah, it was circuitous, my journey to the Waterman. It wasn't something that came my way, it was something I pursued, because I had loved films of this nature growing up. E.T. was a big, big favorite of mine. And, having kids of my own, I just kept on finding myself scratching my head over why we were not making those kind of films anymore. I remember having this run of a few weeks or months where I was showing my kids all these films from the 80s. So Never Ending Story and The Goonies and Stand By Me and Close Encounters, and just really enjoying watching them see films in which the kids who tended to be the protagonists were not just at the center of the narrative, but their emotional journey as well as the adventure was at the center of it. You think about E.T. and it starts with these kids, their dad has left the family. The Goonies, their community is about to be decimated by this developer and they're going to lose all their friends. Stand By Me, they're off to find a dead body, for goodness sake. You know, and I just found myself having such great conversations with my kids, having shown them those kind of films. And so, I let my agency know that this is something I'm sort of in the market for. I wasn't necessarily as a director initially, but then The Waterman came onto the blacklist, the top 100 unproduced films in any given year. And I just knew this was in the vein of those films. And so initially I pursued it as a producer. I knew I wanted to play the father in it. It was originally a white family set in Montana, but I knew that if I played the father, that would change the demographic, should I say, of the family, which is something that even though I loved those films I'd mentioned, I never saw, folks who look like me represented in those films. So that was important to me. And so, yeah, thankfully, Emma Nadell, who wrote the script, was into my vision for it. And then we went on this 4 year journey of developing it and putting it together. We had a director who then left the project. And it was then kind of out of desperation, to be honest. I became the director because we had our financing, we had our star in the shape of Lonnie Chavis. We had a start date that we had to hit because he's on this TV show, and so yeah, I sort of stepped in so that the film wouldn't fall apart.
Yeah, I do. I was going to bring up the movies that you've mentioned because I'm guessing we're of similar ages because I'm a kid of the 80s as well. Maybe I'm
Right.
slightly younger than you, I'm guessing. But those are the movies that I used to grow up watching, E.T. and The Goonies. And also, I have to say, because of the kind of magical side of it, a little bit of Willow in there as well, I have to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Willow.
yeah, yeah,
So it was right
yeah.
up my street. But you're right. I think the only one that I can think of recently was J.J. Abrams did that Super 8 film,
Great, exactly,
very much
exactly.
of its ilk, because we don't, you're right, we don't see these kind of movies before, so even more so for you to get involved. Had you always wanted to direct? Was that always your goal, as in when you were younger that was what you aspired to, or did it just come from when you were acting and learning your trade?
Well, I'd always thought it would be something I would want to do at some point because I just love storytelling. When I still lived in the UK, my wife and I ran a youth theatre, and we directed the productions, and loved that process. And I early on in my career decided I was going to use these wonderful experiences I was having on film sets as an actor as my film school. So I would sit down with, you know, Ava DuVernay, Chris McQuarrie, Anthony Minghella. I would quiz them on, their directorial style, the things that they deem prioritous, the mistakes they've made in the past. Um, I would really pay attention to what was going on, in the crew. What's the director of photography doing? What's the production designer doing? Why are they doing what they're doing? And even without necessarily always expressing why I had that level of inquisitiveness, it was always in the back of my mind. I knew that I wanted to try and understand, this sort of mystical part of our business, which is, being the captain of the ship when it comes to putting a film together. So, I knew I wanted to do it, but The Waterman wasn't the film I was perceiving as to be the first one. It was, I just became so passionate about these kind of films existing. And then, like I say, necessity is the mother of invention. It was like, okay, I've got to now figure out how to do it in this moment. And that's how it came about.
That must have been a good challenge that you jumped straight into it, because you could have quite easily gone down the route of a lot of directors where like you did as a producer, nurture it for so long and have to get financing and all that kind of stuff. Whereas with this one, it's kind of, you're kind of like, okay, I'm jumping off the plank. Let's just do it and see how we go.
Yeah, and it's a bigger film than your average first-time director would do or entertain. And so I think I would have maybe second guessed myself from that point of view as well. It's in the double digits when it comes to the millions of a film, and that's not the norm, and shouldn't be, by the way. So I had to figure out a lot as well on the fly. Like, you don't want to have animals and a bunch of VFX and, for your two leads to be kids on your first movie. But I was operating at an advantage because I had done films like Queen of Cartway and Don't Let Go, and Come Away, all of which had kids in them. I had done films like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and Red Tails, which were heavy on VFX. And again, I had gone on this journey of being very inquisitive while making those movies. The animal piece was definitely a learning curve. Having a bunch of galloping horses in your first movie is insanity. But yeah, you know, a lot of those experiences stood me in good stead.
Yeah. I was going to mention actually going through your obviously your back catalogue that you obviously did something like Interstellar, but then remembering that you're not really in the space stuff. You're
No,
in the school classroom.
but I will say, a day on set with Chris Nolan, a day on set with Steven Spielberg, which was the case pretty much with my participation in Lincoln as well, is worth 10 bad movies with bad directors. I mean, you learn so much from being on those sets with these iconic directors, and there is no question that the confidence, because so much of directing is confidence, and just seeing someone like Chris Nolan on his set doing what he does. The thing I learned from being on a Chris Nolan set is just how brilliant the people he hires are. And so much of what makes Chris Nolan look so great is how great the people around him actually are. And it's intentional. You know, he understands that it's not just him. And there are people I have worked with as directors who don't trust their collaborators enough. They micromanage them, and that disincentivizes those people to do their best work because they just feel like cogs in a wheel as opposed to essential to the creation of the piece. And you know, Chris Nolan, he has every right to be an asshole. And he just isn't. Same thing with Steven Spielberg. Same thing with so many of the great directors I've worked with. So you know, it's those are great lessons to learn, even if they are a brief encounter.
Yeah, yeah. I want to ask you about your cast, particularly Lonnie and Amiah, who I spent most of the movie, and I try not to look at my phone during the movie, trying to place her face. I was like, I've seen her somewhere, something big. I can't place it, and then realized it was Planet of the Apes that I'd seen her in. Ironically, interviewed her at the premiere for that movie, and she was like her first movie, and her mum was there, and she was all excited and stuff like that. But tell me about working with them, because as you say, they are kind of the core of the movie, and they're both so extraordinary in it. That must have made your job slightly easier, knowing that you had two people who were, you know, so into what you were doing, but also had, I guess, the gravitas, even at their age, to pull this off for you.
Not only did it make my job easier, you know, it was such a pleasure to watch the film being elevated by performances given by such young performers. You know, I think sometimes when you watch movies with young people at their core, we sort of give them a bit of a pass if they're not very good. But ultimately, it affects the viewing experience. So when you watch a film like Leon, for instance, and you see that performance that Natalie Portman gives, I think it's called The Professional here in the States, that film. It's like, no, you're not getting a pass because you're a kid. That's just an astounding performance. You know, it's the same thing. It's the same, you know, it's the same thing when you watch Stand By Me. All of those kids are just giving extraordinary performances. And that to me is why I bring up those films, because, you know, that's why they stand the test of time, because you love them as a kid, you then love them when you're older, maybe now a parent, and then even when you're a grandparent, you're still going, my goodness, this has such a feeling of nostalgia, but it still feels true. And so, you know, what I was looking for, and I found in spades with both Lonnie and Amiah, was a high level of emotional intelligence, a professionalism that belies their age, but also a childlikeness that is commensurate with their age. So that's a lot of things they had to do. So for Lonnie, for instance, he had, and they had to be the perfect age, which is also partly why I had to jump in and direct this thing, because we did quite a search for Lonnie. He was clearly the best person on the planet for the job, seemingly. And he was 11 at the time, and he needed to be young enough that you believed he would believe in the waterman, but old enough that he could engage emotionally with what was going on with his mother. And that's a very fine line, because even in Amiah's character, who's 13, and she was that age at the time, she has a little bit more cynicism in relation to the waterman, and manipulates him because she's that bit much older, and so they needed to be not only great performers, but the right age as well. So yeah, that was the search, and we found two needles in a haystack with both of them. And the other great thing, with Lonnie doing This Is Us, with Amiah, as you've already said, doing War of the Planet of the Apes, they had experience, so it wasn't that thing of directing them whilst also teaching them screen acting at the same time. They came with that in their kit bag already.
I was going to ask about Amos, playing Amos for you, because very, very, it gives you another dimension as an actor. It's a very different role for you than some of the roles you played, I guess. Was that good as well? Was that a thing that drew you in initially, that the character was maybe a little bit different for you to be playing?
Always, I'm always looking for the opportunity to do something the likes of which I haven't done before. But ironically, I really connected with this character because I'm a father myself. Both of my parents have now passed away. Both of them had bouts of illness that they dealt with before they ended up passing away. And so I felt very connected to what Gunnar is going through in the film, but I also felt very connected to this theme of loving your child, loving your family, and getting it wrong every day. And the two things can coexist. Sometimes in films it sort of takes a more simplistic line of, oh, okay, he's a guy who's in the military, he hasn't been around his son so much, so it's an inherently dysfunctional relationship that cannot be mended. Or he's a loving father who's there all the time. They have a great relationship. He understands his child, and it's beautiful. Well, that's just not the reality I know to be true. I also am someone whose job takes him away a lot of the time. And so, there are real challenges around being a parent. I have 4 children myself. I have 3 sons and a daughter. So I really understand that dynamic. Especially if for whatever reason there's a disconnect. This guy's a bit of a man's man. His son is more artistic. That was sort of a bit of the dynamic between my father and I. Not so much that my dad was a man's man, but he couldn't really understand my creative side. He was more focused on academia in terms of our relationship. So there were so many things in the film thematically that I connected to and was interested in exploring as an actor as well as a director.
Yeah, absolutely. Has this given you a taste for your next one? Have you kind of got an idea of what you might want to do next? And obviously there seems to be a thing, particularly in Hollywood, where a lot of indie directors take a big jump into a Marvel or a DC or a Star Wars or something like that. Can you see yourself doing something like that, or is it small steps first before, as you've just done one?
Well, I think the advantage I have is, I have this day job as an actor, which means that, I don't think I'm going to feel the necessity to suddenly now go and do a giant $100 million, $200 million movie. It sort of seems almost like a bit of a rites of passage for directors. For me, what has worked well for me as an actor is what I'm hoping to apply to my directing, which is things that I'm very passionate about, things that speak to representation as either a covert or overt part of what the film is also doing. But also, when it comes to directing specifically, it has to be something I am so passionate about because it takes up so much time. You watch your film hundreds of times, literally, and the last thing you want is to sort of feel self-loathing and disappointment every time you're watching your own movie. Like it really has to be something that speaks to me on multiple levels. Those are hard to come by. So I don't know what I'm going to direct next, but the thing I know for sure is that as and when that opportunity presents itself, it's going to be something that, I can happily swallow the notion of spending 2 years of my life doing it. And it's always going to be something that hopefully works on multiple levels. With the Waterman, what I love about it is that it has magic, but hopefully also meaning. It is rooted in reality and fantasy. You are seeing a family the likes of which you don't tend to see in this kind of narrative. It is something that is not patronizing the kids in the film, but is also engaging with the grown-ups in the film. I love films that are truly 3 to 4 quadrant. You can watch it with your kids, their parents, and their grandparents. And so, those are a lot. I'm not saying every film I direct will have that, but I love films that work on multiple levels for multiple demographics. And like I say, those don't grow on trees, but those are the kind of things I'm always looking for.
Absolutely. Have you just quickly as an actor, have you IMDb is always a bit iffy as to what people are doing. You try and keep up with things,
Right.
particularly last year, because obviously a lot of productions have shut down and everything else. But have you been kept busy? Because I remember reading that you were going to be in a movie with Sam Rockwell.
Yeah. No, we shot that film. It is currently untitled, which is maddening. Give us a title. Give us a title, Fox Searchlight. Give us a title. But it's a great sort of comedic murder mystery with Sam Rockwell, Saoirse Ronan, Ruth Wilson, Adrian Brody. Phenomenal cast. We shot it in the dark days of the pandemic, and figured out a way to tell a story that had hundreds of extras. It's all set in the world of the theater in the 50s. And sort of has this Agatha Christie theme going through it. So it's a comedic murder mystery in the vein of Agatha Christie. And yes, I play a flamboyant playwright in that, and it was a lot of fun.
Excellent. It seems to be a fad now since Knives Out and Murder on the Orient Express have been out. That Agatha Christie and Agatha Christie-esque murder mysteries have become, because we haven't had any for so many years, and all of a sudden we're getting quite a few. So that sounds exciting to me.
Yeah. No, it's and this one has an extra layer to it because it is basically it's about a Hollywood producer who's trying to make The Mousetrap the longest running play in West End history. But the catch is Agatha Christie, and this is based on fact. She would only allow him to make the film when the run of the play comes to an end. And and little did he know what was about to ensue. So that's our little conceit and our concept. But it was a lot of fun to shoot that one.
Fantastic. As a final question, you are one of the 4 main people in arguably one of my favorite films of the last 10-15 years, which is A Most Violent Year.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
There's been lots of talk of a sequel. Now, I'm not sure how that would ever come about or anything like that, but is that a movie to you as an actor where you feel like the story, because it was set in kind of the real world in that particular era, that maybe a sequel isn't exactly the best idea? Because it's a movie that I love, and it's one of the, as I say, it's a movie that I've loved over a lot, in the 10 years it would be on my list. I mean, do you think we need a sequel, or do you think there's a story there with the characters that exists?
Well, it's interesting because even when I was talking to JC Chandor early on about doing A Most Violent Year, he talked about the fact that there were these 10-year periods, each 10 years after, when the first film takes place, where New York in particular went through this sort of sea change, and really, really dramatic things happened. And so he always thought of it potentially as a trilogy of films. And then, A Most Violent Year came out, and for a myriad of reasons we need more time to discuss, didn't necessarily make the impact that we certainly felt it deserved. And its fans since also felt that way. But it sort of found this great following. And so, yeah, absolutely. We are talking about, doing another one, because I believe the first one set in 1981. Yeah, so 1981, 1991, and then 2001 were all formative moments in New York history. And so I think the idea is to to have myself, Jessica, and Oscar go another 10 rounds and see what happens.
You're teasing me now. You see, now I've got to see this. In the realm of streaming, some of these movies that perhaps don't set the box office alight do find homes, and then they themselves kind of get a new lease of life on streaming services. I mean, Knives Out, the sequels of Knives Out are going to be on Netflix now, which is crazy. So you never know.
You never know. And at the end of the day, you make these things for an audience. Our business is going to keep on evolving. The audience's habits are going to keep on evolving. But as storytellers, whether it's a play, a radio play, TV, a puppet show, or film, you know what I mean? Like, that's why I love the fact that I'm being offered the opportunity to direct alongside producing, alongside acting, alongside writing. I just love storytelling, and give me a platform where I have access to an audience, and I'll take it. So look, we're talking because my film is about to air on Netflix, but it's had a theatrical life here in the States. It's had a video on demand live here, and now it's going to be seen by millions of people, hopefully, on Netflix. I don't care. As long as, give me the eyeballs and I'm there.
Absolutely. David, listen, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And yeah, I hope everything goes well for you. And I can't wait for that murder mystery film. That sounds so much fun.
Thank you. Yeah, give us a title.
Give him a title, everybody. Come on now. Stay safe. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Nice to see you, Scott.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey!